Know how people today complain about apartment rent being too high? No. Well, at least your apartment probably isn't collapsing while you sleep. Ancient Rome had apartment buildings nearly 2,000 years ago. Real apartment buildings. Multiple floors, tiny rooms, crowded neighbors. And honestly, living in one was kind of terrifying. Rome was enormous. At its peak, over 1 million people packed into the city, which meant everybody needed somewhere to live. Today's crowded cities still struggle with the exact same housing problems Rome faced many years ago. And since there wasn't enough space to solve overcrowding, Romans started building upward. They created multi-story apartment buildings called insulae, basically the ancient Roman version of apartment complexes. Now, at first glance, some of these buildings looked impressive. 5 or 6 stories tall, shops on the bottom floor, families living above. Sounds pretty modern, right? Yeah, until you realize most of them were built incredibly fast and incredibly cheap. Imagine a landlord saying, "A, good enough." That was basically the Roman construction industry. A lot of these buildings used weak materials, thin wooden supports, and rushed construction. Developers wanted to cram as many paying tenants inside as possible, because even in ancient Rome, landlords were landlords. And the higher you lived, the worse things got. The bottom floors were usually rented by wealthier people because they were safer and easier to access. Meanwhile, the poor got shoved all the way to the top, which was bad for several reasons. First, there were no elevators, so every single day people climbed endless stairs carrying food, water, furniture, children, everything. If the building collapsed, the upper floors usually went first, which happened more often than you'd think. Roman writers complained constantly about buildings cracking, leaning, or suddenly falling apart.
Imagine trying to sleep while your apartment makes noises like an old pirate ship.
Now let's talk about the biggest nightmare of all: fire. Ancient Rome burned constantly. People cooked with open flames. Lamps stayed lit at night. Many buildings had wooden interiors packed tightly together beside narrow, crowded streets. It was basically the perfect recipe for disaster. One apartment catches fire, then suddenly the entire neighborhood is burning. And since Rome didn't exactly have modern fire departments, things could spiral out of control really fast. In fact, huge sections of the city burned multiple times throughout Roman history. And honestly, if you lived in one of these apartments, escaping a fire from the upper floors was probably horrifying. Tiny staircases, smoke everywhere, people panicking, absolute chaos. And there was sanitation, or the lack of sanitation. Most apartments didn't have indoor plumbing. No private bathrooms, no running water upstairs, so people dumped waste into the streets. Yeah, the streets of Rome were not exactly pleasant. Imagine thousands of people crowded together in summer heat with garbage, animals, sewage, smoke, and almost no ventilation. The smell alone must have been unbelievable. And because everybody lived so close together, disease spread incredibly fast. Basically, these apartment buildings were overcrowded fire hazards with structural problems and terrible hygiene, yet millions of people still lived in them because they had no choice. And who lived here? Not the rich, but merchants, workers, and immigrants. Ancient writers called insulae unhealthy, dangerous, and unfit for human life. Explorers tried to fix it by imposing height limits and mandating flat roofs. But many ignored the rules as profits over people seemed to matter more to landlords. And the crazy part is, some of these problems still sound familiar today. Overcrowded housing, unsafe buildings, cheap construction, landlords cutting corners. People may live in glass skyscrapers today, but cities are still struggling with some of the exact same problems Rome faced 2,000 years ago, which is honestly kind of wild. Next time, we're heading into the Middle Ages to see how medieval homes managed to survive freezing winters, deadly fires, and sometimes livestock living indoors with people, because somehow housing is about to get even stranger. So that, my friends, is the end of our video, Why Roman Apartments Were Death Traps. If you like this video, I do hope you give us a thumbs up and hope that you will come back for more fascinating strange history of home stories. Until next time, peace.